They were my flesh and blood, my son and his wife, and they wanted me dead for my money. But what they didn't know was that a mother's love, when twisted into betrayal, could forge a weapon sharper than any they could wield. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. Your support means the world, and it reminds me that even after all I've been through, there's still good in the world, people who understand true justice. My name is Margaret Thompson, and for 70 years, I had lived a life of quiet grace, of gentle purpose. My husband, Harold, God rest his soul, had built a thriving import-export business from the ground up. And I had been by his side every step of the way, not just as his wife, but as his rock, his confidant, his partner. When Harold passed 5 years ago, it left a chasm in my heart, but also a legacy of stability and comfort. Our home, a sprawling colonial nestled in the quiet suburbs, was more than just bricks and mortar. It was a repository of memories, of laughter, of life. I filled my days with gardening, volunteering at the local library, and looking forward to the simple joys of family. David, our only son, was everything to me. I had nurtured him, supported him through college, through his various career attempts, always believing in him, always there. When he married Christina, a woman years younger than him, with a quick smile and a sharper wit, I welcomed her into our family with open arms, seeing her as the daughter I never had, a bright new chapter for David and for us all. We'd settled into a comfortable rhythm of weekly dinners, holiday celebrations, and calls just to catch up. Thanksgiving was approaching, and I was, as always, bustling with preparations, eager to have my family around my table. I had just called David to finalize the menu, talking about my famous pumpkin pie and whether he preferred dark or white meat, when my phone, bless its digital heart, decided to play a cruel trick. I thought I had ended the call. I distinctly remember pressing the red button, but apparently I hadn't. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter, my hands busy kneading dough for dinner rolls, humming a forgotten tune. And then I heard them. At first, it was just muffled voices, an echo in the silence of my kitchen. I thought perhaps David had called back, but when I picked up the phone, I realized it was still connected to our earlier conversation. They hadn't hung up. And what I heard next, what seeped through the receiver and coiled around my heart like a viper, changed my life forever. Christina's voice, sharp and cold, cut through the background static. She's an old lady, David, predictable. A dose of sedatives in her tea, a little accident, on the stairs, and it's all ours. The will is clear. Everything goes to you, and through you, to us. We need this, David, you especially, with those gambling debts you've racked up with Marcus. It's the only way out. My son's voice, weak, wavering, was barely audible, a pathetic counterpoint to his wife's steel. But Christina, mother, she's been so good to me. Good to you? Christina scoffed, a chilling, dismissive sound that peeled back layers of facade. She's a cash cow, David, an obstacle. We've talked about this. You want to keep your kneecaps intact? You want to keep time CB? Non, you do this. Thanksgiving is perfect. No one will suspect a thing. Just make sure she's alone, vulnerable. My hands, still covered in flour, began to tremble. The receiver slipped, clattering against the marble counter, but I didn't pick it up. I sank to the floor, the cold tiles a stark contrast to the fire consuming me from within. My son. My own flesh and blood. Planning my demise, for money, for gambling debts. It wasn't just betrayal. It was an amputation of my soul. The shock was so profound it almost numbed me. But beneath the initial devastation, a cold, hard ember began to glow. They thought me an old, predictable lady, an easy target. They were about to learn that Harold Thompson's widow, the woman who had stood beside a titan of industry, had learned a thing or two about strategy herself. The tears came later, in a torrent that washed away the last vestiges of the naive, trusting mother I once was. They didn't know what was coming, but I did. I was going to give them a Thanksgiving they would never, ever forget. The following morning, after a sleepless night spent wrestling with the monstrous reality of what I had heard, a new Margaret began to emerge. The weeping, vulnerable widow was gone, replaced by a woman whose grief had hardened into resolve, whose betrayal had sharpened into a terrifying clarity. Harold had always said, "Margaret, in business, when faced with an insurmountable problem, you don't panic, you analyze, you strategize, you outmaneuver." And though this wasn't business, the principles, I realized, were precisely the same. My first call was not to David, not to a friend, but to a number tucked away in an old leather-bound address book, a card given to me by Harold years ago with a cryptic instruction. "If you ever need real help beyond the ordinary, call James Rodriguez." James had been a discreet investigator Harold occasionally used for sensitive business matters, a man renowned for his silent efficiency and his uncanny ability to uncover truths. My voice, though steady, conveyed the gravity of my situation. I told him I needed surveillance, immediately and discreetly. "My son and daughter-in-law are planning to harm me, Mr. Rodriguez." I stated, my words precise, devoid of emotion. "I need proof. I need protection. And I need a plan to ensure they face the full consequences of their actions." There was no hesitation in his voice. "Consider it handled, Mrs. Thompson. I'll be there within the hour." Within hours, James Rodriguez, a man of quiet competence, with eyes that seemed to miss nothing, was in my home. He moved like a shadow, installing tiny cameras and microphones in key areas: the living room, dining room, kitchen, and my study. He even rigged my personal phone for recording, ensuring every call I made or received would be documented. "This is not just about catching them, Mrs. Thompson," he explained, his voice low and calm. "This is about building an airtight case, one that leaves no room for doubt or denial." I found myself drawing on an inner strength I hadn't known I possessed. My late husband had taught me the value of meticulous record-keeping, and I began to apply it with chilling precision. I started a series of notebooks, each page a ledger of their calls, their visits, any subtle hint of their intentions. I located my original will, the one I had meticulously crafted after Harold's passing, ensuring my assets were managed and dispersed according to my wishes, not their greed. I also sought out copies of all the deeds to my properties, my financial statements, everything that unequivocally proved my sole ownership. While James worked on securing my digital life and physical space, I opened new, separate bank accounts, redirecting my immediate funds to ensure they were beyond the reach of any quick, opportunistic theft. I even consulted with a trusted lawyer, Patricia, not revealing the full extent of my predicament, but subtly drafting a new, legally impenetrable will that included a contingency clause, a specific letter to be opened only in the event of my unexpected demise, detailing my suspicions and the names of my primary investigators. I was not just a victim. I was becoming an architect of justice, a strategist in a war, one never asked to fight, but one I was now determined to win. As James Rodriguez's quiet work continued, so did the audacious arrogance of David and Christina. They escalated their efforts, blissfully unaware of the web I was weaving around them. Their calls became more frequent, laced with thinly veiled attempts to ascertain my health, my state of mind. "Mother, you sound a little tired," David would say, his voice dripping with feigned concern. "Are you sure you're eating enough? Maybe you should consider having a nurse come in, just to keep an eye on things." Christina, ever the more direct, would press, "Have you thought about updating your will, Margaret? You know, with inflation and all, it's always good to make sure everything's current." For David's sake, of course. Each question, each suggestion, was duly noted in my meticulous notebooks, cross-referenced with timestamps from the hidden recorders. The surveillance James had installed began to yield chilling dividends. I listened to conversations between them, recorded in my own living room, as they openly discussed their Thanksgiving plan. I heard Christina gloat about how easy it would be, how predictable I was. David, still the weaker link, would occasionally voice a faint reservation, quickly silenced by Christina's venomous retorts about his mounting gambling debts. "Marcus is getting impatient, David," she'd hiss, "and you know what happens when Marcus gets impatient. This needs to happen, and it needs to happen soon." The mention of Marcus, Christina's brother, sent a fresh wave of dread through me. James's background check on Christina had unearthed a horrifying truth. 2 previous husbands, both wealthy, both died under suspicious circumstances, leaving Christina as the sole beneficiary. She wasn't just greedy, she was a professional predator, a serial black widow, and David, my son, was entangled in her lethal web, pushed by his own desperation, his debts to Marcus Richardson, and his shadowy associates. This wasn't just about inheritance anymore, it was about stopping a murderer. The stakes had been raised exponentially, and my resolve hardened into an unyielding steel. I had to force their hand, accelerate their timeline, make them rush, and in doing so, make mistakes. The day came, not the original Thanksgiving, but an accelerated version I orchestrated myself. A few days prior, I called David, my voice shaky, ostensibly due to a sudden bad spell. "David, darling." I'd whimpered, "I'm not feeling myself at all. I don't think I can wait until next week for Thanksgiving. Could we possibly do it this Friday? I just feel a need to have my family close, sooner rather than later." I could almost hear Christina's predatory smile through the phone as David quickly agreed, the eagerness in his voice thinly disguised. I knew they thought I was weakening, making their job easier. What they didn't know was that I was setting the stage, drawing them into my trap. That Friday, the house was prepared, not for a feast of gratitude, but for an execution. James Rodriguez and his team were stationed discreetly nearby, ready to move at a moment's notice. The police, informed of the gravity of the situation, were on standby, awaiting my signal. I had placed a tiny, almost invisible panic button beneath the antique lace tablecloth, directly beneath my left hand. In my pocket, I carried a small vial of glucose tablets, my ingenious countermeasure against the sedatives I knew were coming. David and Christina arrived, Marcus Richardson, Christina's brother, in tow. His presence, a hulking shadow of menace, solidified everything James had uncovered about the organized crime ties. They exchanged perfunctory greetings, their eyes darting around, assessing the scene. I played my part to perfection. I feigned frailty, a slight tremor in my hands as I poured their drinks, a faint wheeze in my voice as I inquired about their week. Christina, ever the manipulator, offered me a cup of special herbal tea, claiming it was good for circulation. I smiled weakly, accepting it, knowing exactly what was in it. As they began to eat, I made a show of sipping my tea, palming the glucose tablets, and discreetly swallowing them, my body already preparing to fight the effects of whatever sedative they had used. The dinner proceeded with an unsettling civility, David making small talk about his work, Christina complimenting my cooking, but beneath the surface, the tension was palpable. As the sedative began to take hold, I allowed my movements to become sluggish, my eyelids to droop, my breathing to deepen. I slumped slightly in my chair, feigning unconsciousness. The house, I hoped, was recording every sound, every whisper. And then they showed their true colors. Finally, I heard Christina's voice, a triumphant hiss, close to my ear. "The old bat's out cold. Are you sure she's out?" David mumbled, his voice thick with unease. "She always sleeps so lightly." Marcus, his voice a low growl, was less forgiving. "She's gone. Check her pulse, David, then let's get this over with. The timeline is tight. We need her out of here before anyone comes looking." I felt David's hesitant fingers at my wrist, then heard him sigh. "Pulse is steady. She's just deeply asleep." "Good," Christina purred. "Marcus, you know the drill. We'll take her up to her room, make it look like she fell down the stairs in her sleep. A tragic accident. David, you call 911 in the morning after we've had time to clean up and make sure the will is secured." My blood ran cold, but my mind was clearer than ever. This was it. This was their confession, recorded for all the world to hear. As Marcus and David began to lift me from my chair, their hands rough, I subtly, almost imperceptibly, pressed the panic button. The next few seconds were a blur of motion and raw, primal fear. Just as they had me hoisted between them, the front door burst open, crashing against the wall. James Rodriguez, flanked by 2 uniformed police officers, stormed into the dining room, weapons drawn. "Police, don't move!" the command echoed through the stunned silence. David froze, his face contorted in disbelief and terror. Christina shrieked, a high, piercing sound of pure rage, trying to lunge at me even as the officers moved in to restrain her. Marcus, ever the hardened criminal, instantly dropped me and made a move for the back door, but another officer, already stationed there, apprehended him with practiced ease. "It's all on tape, Mrs. Thompson," James said, his voice calm, reassuring, as he helped me back into my chair. "Every word." Christina, now handcuffed, screamed at me, her face a mask of venom. "You old hag, you set us up. You tricked us." David, handcuffed and weeping, could only stare, his face pale and bewildered. "Mother, why?" But I didn't answer him. My eyes met Christina's, and in that moment, I let her see the steel that had replaced the woman she thought she could easily discard. It was over. The fallout was swift and devastating for them, a tsunami that swept away their carefully constructed world of deceit. David, Christina, and Marcus were formally arrested, booked, and denied bail. The recordings from my home, coupled with James Rodriguez's exhaustive documentation of Christina's past and David's gambling debts, provided irrefutable evidence of conspiracy to kidnap and murder. The local news buzzed with the scandal, the story of the sweet old widow who outsmarted her murderous family. The public outrage was immense, and the legal system for once moved with remarkable efficiency. Christina Thompson, revealed as a serial predator, was charged not only with conspiracy to murder me, but also with the murders of her 2 previous wealthy husbands, whose suspicious deaths were now being reinvestigated with the full weight of the evidence James and I had uncovered. Marcus Richardson faced charges of attempted kidnapping, extortion, and his deep ties to organized crime, which were now being meticulously unraveled. David, my son, caught between his wife's wickedness and his own crippling debts, was charged with conspiracy. He tried to claim coercion, manipulated by Christina, but the recordings of his weak but complicit agreements were undeniable. His pathetic pleas for my forgiveness, delivered through his lawyer, were met with my unyielding silence. It was too late. The woman who could forgive had died on the kitchen floor that day. Weeks turned into months, filled with court dates, testimonies, and the grim process of justice. Christina was ultimately sentenced to death for her murders, a fate she met with a cold, unrepentant glare. Never breaking eye contact with me, Marcus Richardson, her brother, received a life sentence, his criminal enterprise utterly dismantled. David, to my conflicted surprise, received a reduced sentence of 12 years, with the possibility of parole in 7. For his cooperation in exposing the wider Richardson criminal organization and its extensive network of fraud and violence. He had, in a twisted way, chosen to survive, to salvage a sliver of his humanity by confessing the full scope of their operations. But even his reduced sentence brought me no joy, only a profound sense of loss for the son I had loved and the life we could have had. In the midst of this turbulent period, an unexpected ally emerged. Sarah Chen. Sarah had been the first wife of Robert Chen, Christina's first victim. For years, she had carried the burden of suspicion, the unproven certainty that Christina was a murderer. Sarah had spent years meticulously gathering her own evidence, tracing Christina's movements, connecting the dots that law enforcement had, until now, dismissed. United by our shared trauma and our unyielding quest for justice, Sarah and I discovered an immediate, powerful kinship. Her independent investigation, combined with the evidence we had compiled, unveiled a far larger, more insidious organized crime network, one that preyed on wealthy individuals with vulnerabilities like gambling debts, using manipulative women like Christina to infiltrate families and strip them bare. Our combined efforts, working closely with law enforcement, led to the dismantling of the entire Richardson organization. Millions in stolen assets were recovered, and numerous arrests and convictions followed, bringing a sense of closure to countless other victims. With the legal battles behind me, my old house, the scene of such profound betrayal, no longer felt like home. I sold it, along with many of Harold's old business assets, not out of necessity, but out of a need for a fresh start, untainted by the ghosts of the past. I bought a small, serene villa by the sea, a place where the rhythmic crash of waves could wash away the lingering shadows. I didn't want a life of quiet retirement anymore. The woman I had been was gone, replaced by someone stronger, sharper, forged in the fires of betrayal. Sarah and I, leveraging our combined resources, our unique insights, and our unwavering determination, co-founded Second Chances Investigation. We dedicated our lives to helping other victims of similar crimes, using our experiences to guide, protect, and empower those who felt hopeless. Our firm became a beacon of hope for many, working alongside law enforcement to bring down more hidden networks, to restore justice where it had been stolen. My life had taken an unforeseen turn, one I never could have imagined. I was no longer a victim. I was a hunter, a protector, an orchestrator of justice. Years later, I received a call from a prison number. It was David. He was up for parole soon. His voice, matured by years of incarceration, sounded genuinely remorseful. He spoke of his regret, his shame, his understanding of the magnitude of his actions. But then he offered a warning. "Mother," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "the network, it's bigger than we thought. There are still parts of it out there. People who remember. Be careful. They won't forget what you did." I thanked him for the warning, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of the old affection for my son. But the fear? That was gone. I was no longer the unsuspecting widow. I had faced down death, betrayal, and a vast criminal enterprise. I was ready for anything. I had found my purpose, my second chance. My life, once seemingly over, had truly just begun. And that's my story, a testament to what a mother can become when pushed to the brink. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.